Brian Chen. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We are all familiar with terms like trolling, canceling, and virtue signaling. In effect, an effort to show publicly how right and righteous I am while treating those who think differently with contempt, including castigating them, banishing them, or doing something even worse. What's behind all this? I'm sure not many of you, being useful, have heard of a man named Barry Goldwater. He's an old senator from the state of Arizona. He was a Republican presidential nominee who got trounced by the incumbent Lyndon Johnson in 1964 presidential election. But his legacy, it seems, is alive and well, particularly among public intellectuals, political pundits, and journalists, and also university students, most of whom disdain the Republican Party and the conservative values that this party claims to uphold. This is to say, these political and social progressives have become the disciples of this very conservative Republican Senator Barry Goldwater. How so? Consider a very famous quote from Goldwater's speech given after he accepted the Republican Party nomination for the presidency in 1964. He said, "Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue." One time. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. What's the context here? Goldwater was namely against two things. One, he didn't want the federal government to encroach upon the rights of states. Two, he was against the spread of communism. Now, taking communism as the main focus of Barry Goldwater's main contention, extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice means that communism that erodes liberty is so bad that it is okay to use any means necessary, even the most extreme measures, the no-holds-barred approach to defeat communism. Moderation in seeking to do so, defeating communism, is no virtue. So any means is necessary since communism is so bad. Why do I say that our culture warriors have become Barry Goldwater's disciples? It's because the followers of what is known as Goldwaterism feel like when we are right, that is, we are on the right side of the issue, we aren't just content to express our disagreement, however passionately. On top of that, we must treat the people whom we see on the wrong side with extreme measures. We aren't satisfied unless we demean and humiliate those with different views, even doing things against them, like taking away their ability to speak, study, make a living. No, you say, not in America. Yes, in America. That is, Goldwaterism is alive and well today than ever before. You know, Goldwaterism is, in a nutshell, is this. Extremism in defense of what I deem to be true is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of what I take as just is no virtue. We must go all in, trolling, canceling, and virtue signaling to defeat the enemy, those with differing views. That's Goldwaterism. Now, instances of Goldwaterism are ubiquitous in today's America. Consider this. A couple days ago, I saw my neighbor, Mary, not her real name, and you will see why I'm using a fake name, not a real name. Now, she's in her late 50s, and I run into her every now and then when we walk our dogs. I had not seen her for about 3 to 4 weeks because I was out of town. She's a very gregarious person, and while we're talking, she just blurted out that, hey, I'm of the Ukrainian descent, and that her husband's parents are from Russia. Now, as quickly as Mary said Russian, she put her hand on her mouth, looked around sheepishly, and said, I guess I'm not supposed to say that. I hope she was kidding. Maybe Mary heard the Democratic congressman from California, Eric Swalwell, say on CNN, quote, "Frankly, I think kicking every Russian student out of the United States should be on the table. Kick every Russian student out from the universities." Maybe that's what Mary heard. What? Everyone a Russian student? Instead of, if it really becomes a matter of national security, then perhaps case by case, depending on with whom we are dealing with, perhaps children of Russian officials. But Swalwell wants to kick out every Russian student from the United States. I will address it later, but didn't something like that happen in the 1940s with an entire population of another ethnic group in the United States? Look, I can hate Putin with the best of them, and he deserves it. Nonetheless, shouldn't we distinguish between Putin and many of the ordinary Russian people abroad who hate this world just as much as you and me? But can I really say exactly what you want to hear from them? Like, I hate Russia and I hate Putin. Would that satisfy your sense of righteousness? Along that line, I've noticed that several Russian artists and athletes working abroad have been pressured by cultural elites to express their political opinion. I'm against Putin, I hate him, and even denounce their homeland, Russia. For example, Anna Netrebko, the renowned Austro-Russian operatic soprano who recently suspended her singing at the famous Met in New York City under pressure for her ties to Putin, has said this. She said, quote, "I'm opposed to this senseless war of aggression, and I'm calling on Russia to end this war now, to save all of us. We need peace right now." End of a quote. Should she have said more? Yes, she could have said, "I hate Putin and I hate Russia." But maybe she had reasons to not go there, at least not yet anyway. Maybe she has family concerns. Who knows? But for now, is it sufficient? I'm opposed to the senseless war of aggression, and I'm calling on Russia to end this war now. Or should we go all extreme on her and other Russians abroad and demand that they declare loudly and repetitiously how much they hate Putin and Russia? Are we really that righteous? I understand our sense of justice has provoked us to be outraged at what Putin is doing, but perhaps we should consider that moderation in expressing our justifiable outrage can be virtue, and extremism in defense of our sense of righteousness may be vice, or at the very least, foolish. Let me say that one more time. Could it be that moderation in expressing our justifiable outrage can be virtue, and extremism in the defense of our sense of righteousness may be, at the very least, foolish? Look at it this way. What if country you or your parents are from becomes the next public enemy of the rest of Americans? What if the Democratic congressman Eric Swalwell and people who react like him call for your expulsion from America? As you well know, one concern several political observers have is what China may do to Taiwan under their One China policy, which they believe hinges on the U.S. response to the war being fought in Ukraine right now. So when and if China does the unthinkable, that is, attack Taiwan, which according to a friend missionary in Taiwan is what Taiwanese are dreading right now, is Eric Swalwell going to call for the expulsion of all Chinese students from America? Recall that that's exactly what happened to the Japanese Americans in early 1940s when Japan, the nation, bombed Pearl Harbor in 1941. 112,000 people of Japanese descent, many of whom were born in the United States, lost everything overnight when Franklin Roosevelt, through his executive order, in turn, that is, incarcerated these people in special camps set up in states like Montana and New Mexico. Suffice to say, it destroyed their life. Many of them were Americans. I understand that it was a perilous time for America, suddenly facing a war with a nation that had many of her people of Japanese descent, living in the United States. You may say, well, extreme times call for extreme measures. But at the same time, we should exert all effort not to punish the innocent along with the guilty. Isn't that the American way? Not to punish the innocent with the guilty? My point is this. I don't know how many Russians you know personally in the United States, but whether Russian or not, in any relationship, don't be, borrowing the words of Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 16, over righteous, as if you are the most righteous person in the world. Let me read the entire Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 16 through 18. 7 says, do not be over righteous, neither be over wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It's good to grasp the one and let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extremes. Focusing just on what I'm trying to convey here, this seems to be saying, be righteous, but don't be over righteous. That is, over the top righteousness, as if you are the most holy and righteous person alive. Perhaps like Will Smith slapping Chris Rock's face in front of a live audience on account of a joke at his wife's expense. That's being extreme. We are told to avoid being over-righteous and extreme, even for the right cause. So unless you are Ukrainian who are greatly affected by that war, especially those who lost everything, including family members, I said to the rest of us, don't be over-righteous. Don't be extreme. Don't hate on Russians. Be content when Russians say, I'm opposed to this senseless war of aggression, and I'm calling on Russia to end this war right now. Let me share another example of Goldwaterism, that is trolling, canceling, and virtue signaling, which I can restate as extremism in the defense of what I hold as sacred is no vice. And moderation in pursuit of something I hold important is no virtue. That is readily seen on university campuses that are built on, if anything, the freedom of speech. Now, according to Wikipedia, as a quick reference, freedom of speech is a principle that supports the freedom of an individual or a community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. Freedom of ability or community to articulate their opinions and ideas without fear of retaliation, censorship, or legal sanction. So what do you do when you hear speech you don't like? Students in some of our best universities have said, heck with the free speech we don't like. We are going to make sure that those with whom we disagree never utter a single word. And that's exactly what recently happened at Yale University, one of top universities in America, and University of Virginia, one of top public university in United States as well. A couple of weeks ago at Yale, more than 100 students attending Yale Law School, arguably the best law school in America, came to an event organized by a conservative group on campus to hear from, among others, a conservative and progressive speaker agreeing on the importance of free speech. So one from the right, one from the left gathered together to underscore the importance of free speech. But these elite law school students weren't there to hear any speech, but to shut down the speakers. They became so aggressive and threatening that the conservative speaker said, quote, it was disturbing to witness law students whipped into a mindless frenzy. I did not feel it was safe to get out of the room without security. So security was called. And shortly thereafter, the University of Virginia student newspaper, the Cavalier Daily, upon finding out that former Vice President Mike Pence would speak on campus, declared that he shouldn't speak at all, deeming his future talk as unjustifiable speech. We refuse to condone platforming Pence, they said, because his belief threatened, quote, the well-being and safety of students, end of quote. Really? That's how our university students think? They don't tolerate dissent? They don't tolerate a diversity of viewpoint expressed on, of all places, college campuses? I happen to know about these two schools because my kids went there, and I would like to believe that my kids learned the importance of hearing out and then consider diverse viewpoints before formulating their own perspective. But keeping someone like Pence from speaking on account that his speech is threatening is either a flat rejection of his speech or a serious distortion of it. Personally, to me, Pence seemed a whole lot more decent human being than the man who chose him as the vice president of the United States. To put it bluntly, it is a whole lot more believable when Pence says I'm a Christian than his former boss. Nevertheless, I got really annoyed whenever Pence would give a speech in President Trump's presence during the first year of COVID in 2020 because he couldn't talk about any progress made as far as U.S. response to COVID was concerned without giving credit to Trump. No, I didn't count, but it appeared as though Pence did that as often as North Koreans when they talk in front of their great leader, Kim Jong-un. Thank you, our great leader, for the air we breathe. Maybe constant deference to Trump was Pence's way of surviving under him. Who knows? Of course, Pence broke away from Trump on January 6, 2021, when he refused to decertify the 2020 election result, even though doing so was very unpopular, if not risky, thing for Pence to do among the Trump followers. I'm saying all this to say that public can benefit from hearing from someone like Pence, after which we can affirm or be critical or both of what he said, and if there's an opportunity, we can publicly state without insulting the person why we feel the way we do. Does that sound too moderate for you? Well, that's the foundation upon which our country is built, freedom of speech. But these bright students have drunk from the Kool-Aid of Goldwaterism. Extremism in the defense of liberal and progressive value is no vice, and moderation in expressing dislike or disapproval of Trump and people associated with him is no virtue. I dissent from that. Look, we need to be careful when we simply assume that what we believe and the motive behind it are absolutely right and pure. This is especially true when we think that what we believe is to benefit the people, particularly the poor and the marginalized. We want a better society where the have-nots can have what the haves enjoy, sort of like utopia. But utopianism always spells disaster because according to philosopher Thomas Molnar, the utopians hold that if the goal is goodness and perfection, then use of force is justified. That's why Pol Pot, Stalin, Mao Zedong all felt so justified in purging millions of undesirables. The educated class, including in the case of Pol Pot, those who wear glasses, who stood in the way of establishing their version of classless society. That's why a good Judean king named Asa, in his zeal to clean house for the Lord by making change like 1 Kings 15:12, expelling the male shrine prostitute from the land and getting rid of all the idols, all good things, but also did this. 2 Chronicles 15:13, all who would not seek the Lord, the God of Israel, were to be put to death, whether small or great, man or woman. All who did not want to believe in God were executed under this good and godly king, Asa. Undoubtedly, many people converted on that day to believe God, but you have to wonder how many were being genuine in doing so. So I guess Asa's motto was, extremism in the defense of God's holiness is no vice, and moderation in cleaning house for God is no virtue. That's not how we are to live our lives. Let me repeat Ecclesiastes 7:16 through 18. Do not be over-righteous, neither be over-wise. Why destroy yourself? Do not be over-wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? It is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. Whoever fears God will avoid all extreme. I get that fearing God will have a direct bearing on not being wicked and over-wicked. However, what does fearing God have to do with avoiding being extreme and over-righteous? I think it comes down to taking ourselves too seriously, assuming that our strong stance on important issues, extreme and over-righteous posture, somehow makes a statement about how wonderful and exceptional we are as human beings. But by elevating ourselves like that, while looking down and forcing ourselves on those with whom we disagree, we are taking the place of God as the ultimate arbiter of all humans and all that they do. It's not your extreme righteousness that will set things right. No, but it will be God who will set things right. Being confused over this matter shows that we do not have a proper fear of our omnipotent and sovereign Lord, who doesn't need our over-righteousness to carry out his will. In fact, our over-righteousness, like that of King Asa, who killed people for not believing God, may end up doing just the opposite, bring discredit to God's holy name. That is why, in my opinion, blowing abortion clinics to stop abortion, a heinous act against the unborn, will never be acceptable to God. That's over-righteousness. That's extremism. And God told us to avoid that. Yes, we do need to fight unrighteousness with our righteous words and actions coming from the right heart. But because we fear God, we must avoid extreme measures like calling out every Russian, stopping free speech because we don't agree with what other people are saying, using violence in the name of helping the poor, like what some people on the left insist, blowing up abortion clinics on account of saving the life of the unborn, forcing people to believe God, like King Asa. No, we must avoid all extremism, over righteousness, thereby leaving plenty of room for God to do only what God can do. And that's, of course, what happened on the cross. Only God can forgive sins, and he did that by sending his own son, Jesus Christ, to take our sin, and by dying for it on the cross, he has a right to offer us forgiveness of our sin, for the sin has been paid by his son's death, and by believing him and his atoning sacrifice, we are given not only the forgiveness of sin, but eternal life. So believe Jesus.